What's up everyone, Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick and I have an album review for you. So another one that came out on the 17th of September was the newest album from Alien Weaponry, Tangaroa. This comes out on Napalm Records. This is this band's second album. This band formed in 2010 when brothers Henry and Louis Rahi De Jong, sorry, that is a tough one to pronounce, formed this band when they were only 10 and 8 respectively. Now, one really cool thing about this band is these guys bring in a really cool cultural aspect. They bring in a lot from Maori culture, and they bring in a lot of the language, the chants, some of the tribal elements, and bring it into their mix of groove metal, a little bit of thrash, and occasionally death metal. This band pretty much exploded with their first album. I pretty much saw their videos everywhere, and I really enjoyed what they did, like that incorporation of all those elements together with just, you know, straightforward chugging, big grooves, and some really cool, interesting vocal hooks. Again, they do a lot of stuff in the Maori native tongue, and only part of this is actually in English. And theme-wise, they actually bring up a lot of, you know, stuff in New Zealand's history in terms of the treatment of Maori people. But also you get, you know, your usual tropes from young bands, you know, growing up and trying to figure out life and stressors and such. So this was an interesting listen across the board. Now it starts off with the opener, Tito Kowara. I'm gonna struggle a lot. I struggle with just about every language, so yeah, get ready for it. Opens up with some cool beach atmosphere, and then you slowly hear the tribal chants start picking up. And it goes right into straight up chugging, a solid groove, and Maori chanting. Pretty much kind of like a really stripped down Gojira. I'm reasonably sure these guys probably all own a copy of Sepultura's Roots because it really has that feel too. And if they don't, they should probably pick that up because seems appropriate. Now, while I liked the really cool chorus melody, I really wasn't a fan of just the kind of bare bones chugging and then kind of just letting the chants sort of take the front stage. Like, the music behind it kind of needs to be interesting. And that was kind of an issue I had with this. Get ready to go to the chug well and just drain it dry, because this band kind of just hangs on to one particular dynamic really long. And by long, I mean for over 60 minutes. This album, when you take out the radio edit tracks at the end, which there are 5 of them, and I don't think all of them are even singles, so radio edits don't seem really necessary there, it's still an hour. It'd be like an hour and a half with all the other tracks on there, so it's a bit much. Now, the first 4 tracks all pretty much labor this kind of same formula that the first track kicks off with. Maori chants, kind of tribal vocals, a really cool kata, I believe that's what they call it. And if I got it wrong, I'm sorry to the entire island of New Zealand, because what they do is really cool. It's kind of like this just aggressive chant, and I like it. It's very rhythmic, it's very powerful, it's almost just percussive with the voice. But the part that kind of drives me nuts is, again, generally the music behind it isn't very interesting. Like, you just get a lot of chuggy riffs. You get some interesting melodies here and there. Like I said, the chorus riff in the opening track is pretty good, but for the most part, the formula is just sort of built around the rhythm. And while the rhythm is interesting, it's generally kind of a cool sort of bouncing chug, little new metally in spots, kind of genty here and there, but the formula gets really old. And then there are issues with the production. The production on this, I don't know, I don't quite get it. Like, the drums sound really good. The guitars kind of sound a little muffled. They actually sound like they need to come up in the mix. And the vocals have very dry production. Like, it sounds like they didn't do anything to the vocals, and they weren't necessarily even recorded in like a proper vocal booth or a studio at all. They sound like they were just sort of shouted across the room. Like, it's not a reverb effect, it just sounds as though they just yelled it across the room, which might be what they went for, just to get a more natural sound. But a little bit of reverb, a little bit of compression on the vocals might have helped them come off a little bit more clear, because when they're chanting, when they're doing the kata stuff, it's pretty cool. It doesn't sound too bad. It's when the clean scene comes in that it gets a little rough. I really notice it on the song Unforgiving, which is the longest song on here, and kind of takes a while to build up. Like, a long time before anything really gets interesting, which honestly it didn't get interesting towards the end, because it's this long build and it's sort of clean guitars and just, you know, like a syncopated rhythm with the bass and drums, and then clean vocals. And this is almost entirely clean vocals, and this is the first song that is entirely in English. And the vocal rhythm is odd, and the choice of chord progressions for the vocals to follow is odd. It doesn't really generate a hook, and it feels like it should, because he sounds like he's like really kind of pouring his heart out about teenage struggles. I'm really not sure. Like it sounds as though it is very personal, but the chord progression, and you get some sour notes in there, which kind of makes you think they could have gone back over it and kind of, you know, smooth it out a little bit, maybe get an additional take on there or a harmony. But it just sounds very dry, and it just doesn't sound like a lot of attention was paid to really building the song up, because when it finally does pick up, it kind of just goes into the same thing you heard on earlier tracks with the syncopated chugs and maybe like a little weird tag at the end of the riff. Most of this is just laying on that E string, probably to the point where the rest of the strings are pressing charges for neglect, because they really don't do very much outside of the chug on here. But that isn't to say it doesn't work sometimes. The title track, I think, is pretty damn good. It's well written. It has a cool flow to it. It really builds up to the chorus, which the chorus actually has a pretty good hook on it. And it incorporates both the Maori verses and even some English verses in there, so you get this cool contrast. And honestly, the melodies in that song are pretty damn memorable. The song Blinded, probably my favorite track on here, because this one really generates probably the best chorus and best melodies, both vocally and guitar-wise on here. It's a little more straightforward than the rest of the songs. It pretty much just kind of sticks to a solid, straightforward kind of groove metal, almost kind of rock aesthetic. Just builds up to a big chorus with a big hook, and kind of reminded me of Silverchair. I don't think it's just because they're Australian, but it might be. But it kind of did, just because it stays in kind of their groove too. And there are similarities in the band, not only just in the age and such, but how they write songs. There is kind of a limited wheelhouse in terms of what they do. And because of that, there isn't much variety on here, to be honest. Probably the most different song on here is Crooked Monsters, because it starts off almost like 90s alternative, almost kind of Radiohead-ish, and then moves into almost stoner metal territory. Like it gets kind of trippy, a little psychedelic before kind of turning on the chug once more. But the fact that it actually was different there for a moment and kind of built into what they did, and you know, it delivered what they did pretty well, which they did well on other tracks. I kind of like the fact that they kind of broke out of the cycle in here, because by halfway through, honestly, you've almost heard everything that you're going to hear on here. Outside of some very Sabbathy sort of melodies on Down the Rabbit Hole, pretty much everything after Crooked Monsters is rinse, chug, and repeat. And that's really unfortunate, because it seems like there are moments within those songs where they could have broken out, and you can kind of hear it, but they didn't. They went back to the well, they went back to the comfort zone, which I think this whole album is one big comfort zone, because I don't think I've heard a band lay on one style of riffing for such a long album in a while. And in terms of how some of these songs are constructed, it's a little odd sometimes. There were 3 tracks on here that I thought were going to be instrumentals, because the instrumental lead-in was so long, the vocals didn't come into almost a halfway point. Crooked Monsters, though I really liked it, the vocals don't come into almost the halfway mark. And then Kai Watu has a long instrumental lead-in, and so does Ihenga, which kind of sounds like, you know, a very rootsy song. It really kind of has like the most distinct Maori chant. In fact, I think it sounds like it's a whole group of people outside of the band doing it, which is really cool. But the way it started off, I thought it was just going to be a chuggy instrumental, and honestly, it could have worked as that. Like, the vocals maybe weren't necessary there. I just feel like this band sort of included everything that they wrote. There wasn't anything cast off, you know, in terms of like editing, because these songs can run a bit long considering what they're doing. Like, I love chuggy breakdowns. I love bands that live on chuggy breakdowns. Been listening to Fear Factory and Meshuggah for years, but those bands know how to make that interesting. There's more dynamics in what they do. These guys kind of still learning. They're kind of young. They still haven't figured that out, so they go to what they're comfortable with, and it's a chug. It's always a big chug. And the grooves are very similar pretty much across the board outside of some blast beats in the title track and then a weird syncopated thrashy section in the song Dad. This became sort of a exercise in patience after a certain point. I like minimalistic riffing, but this is beyond minimalistic. This is even kind of beyond like the new metal minimalistic stuff where it was just essentially the Korn riff over and over again and like squealy effects. You get all that here, but I think this level of syncopation is at least a little bit better. But still, the music is so one-dimensional, and that sucks because the ideas behind it in terms of the themes and such are really good. I really enjoy, the fact that they're bringing this sort of like cultural thing into music. I think it's a really good idea, and they incorporate it really well. I just think the music needs to be a bit better. But this band is young, and they're going to continue to learn and continue to grow musically if they keep doing it. And I want them to do more because I like these guys. I like the ideas behind the music, and there are songs in here that show a lot of promise. It's just, I think they need to grow a little bit more musically. So overall, I'm going to give this 2 stars. Unfortunately, I don't think it's musically very good, but I am rooting for these kids. I want them to come back because this is a sophomore slump. That's how I see it. They kind of pushed too hard or at least stayed in one comfort zone. Sophomore albums are tricky, especially if your first one was pretty successful. You're trying to match up to that one or even beat it. And sometimes you push too hard in one direction. Sometimes you get too lackadaisical in another, and you end up with, a bit of a dud in comparison to the first one. Again, while I love all the cultural aspects, the music is too safe. It's too stagnant. It stays in the same place for way too long. And it deserves better production. The production on here is pretty rough. It just needs more fine-tuning kind of overall. I hope when this band gets their touring dates in, that when they get back to the studio and decide to write again, they pretty much woodshed the shit out of that and just really go for some passionate tunes and step outside of the comfort zone, because don't make chugs boring. Chugs are awesome. Don't make breakdowns boring. Breakdowns are awesome. But you can have too much of a good thing, and if you rely on one dynamic too much, it kind of stagnates after a while. This band has the potential to really do some cool things, but I kind of want to see them push a little bit harder than this. This was kind of uneventful, and that sucks because, again, I'm rooting for these kids. I want them to do well. So I strongly recommend that if you do like this band, you do like this album, or like any other albums, go out there and support them because they're young and they're just getting started. And I think there is a lot of potential with this band. I just have a good feeling that these guys are going to eventually really just write one hell of an album that absolutely kicks ass. I could be wrong on that one, but I don't know. I'm rooting for them. So if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We're also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there will be a link below, and we also have a giveaway going on. Once we hit 7,500 subs, which we were over the 7,200 mark, so thank you guys very much for helping us out there. We appreciate the shit out of that. We will be giving away a stack of 8 CDs with the new Cannibal Corpse in there with the Ultra Naughty album cover on it, so cool collector's item there. All you have to do is comment on the video linked down below for the giveaway, and you are in. We also still have some shirts available. If you would like one, hit us up on thrallsofmetal@gmail.com. We still have, I believe, larges, extra larges, 2Xs, and possibly a small. I say that a lot. I'm really not sure, but I'm pretty sure the small is still there. So one of you tiny people need to get that. Again, all you have to do is hit us up in the Gmail, send us a message, put shirts in it, and we will get back to you and hopefully sell you a shirt. So with that, I thank all of you once again, and we will catch you later.